Well, this is part of a national day of action called by Unite the Union, called by Unite Community. And our protest today is one of 77 actions that are taking place up and down the country, which is about getting rid of benefit sanctions entirely, and also we want the work capability assessment scrapped.
I've come to the protest because of the ridiculous nature of sanctions and people being terrified, even if they are looking for work and if they are doing what the job centre wants, of risking a sanction, which means they get part or whole of the money stopped for a number of weeks. So they have to rely on food banks, or they have to rely on the charity of friends. And both professionally and also in my personal life, I've seen the effect of this burden of sanctions and the poverty and the angst that it creates, and it's completely and absolutely unnecessary. So we think it should be stopped.
I'm hoping there'll be changes on May the 7th, because we cannot go on like this. The poor and the sick and the disabled are being penalised while the bankers get away with murder. So, I'm glad that so many people have turned up, but I hope more people will turn up and more people will vote. And I say to the young people, I know why you don't feel like voting, because they're all the same, but they're not all the same. There are candidates who are standing out against austerity, and you've got to vote for them. So make sure you've got to vote and use it.
But just shy of 1 million people have now been sanctioned as a result of these new measures that the government introduced 2 years ago. Of those, only 20% have found work. That means that 80% of those people who have been sanctioned are now without work, but also without benefits. It will be of some consolation to Mr. Osborne, no doubt, and his chummy and Duncan Smith, that 32,000 of those people have unfortunately died whilst they've been on no benefit at all.
Basically, people suffering from long-term illnesses, people who are sick and disabled, are having to go through these capability assessments that are there's nothing fair about them. They don't have redress to their own GP or anything like that. And here in Kirklees alone, it was in the Examiner last week that in Kirklees and Calderdale, 3,000 people were taken off incapability benefits. And as I say, these are amongst the poorest people in the country. And between them, benefit sanctions, work capability, are forcing hundreds of people into debt, into hunger. We all know about the rise of food banks. And even in more and more cases, people found fit for work and maybe managing for a few months at a time, and quite a few people have died.
People, real people, working class people, disabled people have never had it as worse than it is at the moment. And that's why really we need to keep protesting. We need to keep highlighting the injustices that's being carried out by this government and their lackeys. And we need to make sure that come May the 8th, that these buggers are no longer in a position to wage the war upon us.
I'm thinking of someone who it was discovered by job search that they'd not done job search on the 25th of December, so they got a sanction for that. I know people who've not turned up to interviews because they've got letters but they've been illiterate, and they've been sanctioned for that. People who are on job seekers but quite clearly mentally ill or have got learning difficulties, and they get sanctioned for that. Or someone who applied for I think about 10 jobs, but there were 2 jobs that they refused to apply for because of the conditions they'd be working in. And even though they'd applied for 10 jobs, they were playing the game, they got threatened with sanctions for that. It's just an utterly brutal regime.
It's either all politics or none of it is politics, because politics is, to me, dividing people along party political lines. I'm for unity, people working together to make changes, and we can make changes as long as we don't allow the powers that be to divide and rule. That's what they do. They divide us against each other, and then they rule us. So that's what we've got to do.
These sanctions are not fit for purpose. There's nothing fair about them, and they are punishing and criminalising the poorest people in society, immigrants as well. Immigrants and the poor are being demonised, criminalised, so that people won't look up there and blame the government for their anti-working class policies.
There should be no sanctions for claimants and no targets for staff. The people at the job centre should be there to help people find work and administer the benefits if they can't find work, not to threaten, bully or persecute people, and in turn they should not be bullied or persecuted by their managers.
And they aim to get 5 billion from the tax avoiders. You can be rest assured there will be solicitors now, and there'll also be accountants who are pouring through the accounts of their millionaire chums to make sure that they can avoid complying with that legislation. But you can also be rest assured that the welfare cuts this government intends to bring in will hit us even harder than they have already. And that's why we need to fight back.
The job centre staff are victims of the system just like all of us. And I know, because they come to our meetings, many of them are on our side. But of course, they've got a job to do and they have to go along with the rules that are being given them. Otherwise, they'll be jobless. So they're in a very difficult position. But they're trade unionists, and the trade unions are fighting for their rights the same as everybody else's.
I think those protests up and down the country, it brings the calamity of people who are sanctioned and people who are destitute into the public eye, which is of use. But more importantly than that, when you've got a deluge of negative press against benefit claimants, it does go some way successfully, I think, to redressing that balance and showing people that it's not benefit claimants to blame for the woes of the government. It's corporate interests, bankers and politicians.
We hope people will think about joining Unite Community. They can get in touch with me, June Jones, on 07761 90 552. And we meet at the job centre every Monday morning if people want to come along to help people appeal against benefit sanctions. We also help people appeal against the bedroom tax, so come along, join us, let's link up with the employed workers' unions in this area, and together with unity we are a powerful force, that can make a massive difference to what's going on.